All right, let's get started. Welcome to today's American Community Media Weekly National News Briefing. I'm Sunita Sarabji, ACOM's health editor and co-producer of our weekly national news briefings with my colleague Pilar Marrero. Today's briefing is conducted in partnership with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. This is the first of three briefings ACOM will conduct in partnership with RWJF. Beginning tomorrow, November 1st, 42 million Americans will lose their Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, also known as SNAP. This program is a lifeline for working families and their children, disabled people, veterans, and many others. But amid the government shutdown, SNAP benefits distributed in the form of food stamps will not be delivered. A $5.5 billion contingency fund reserve is available, but will not be deployed, leaving millions of Americans hungry. Several states, including California, have stated that they cannot backfill these critical nutrition benefits. It's worth noting that as we come online this morning, in Massachusetts, federal judge Indira Talwani is expected to issue a ruling on whether the USDA must use its contingency fund to at least partially fund SNAP aid amid the shutdown. 25 other states, including California, are suing the federal government to distribute the reserve funds. And longer term, the One Big Beautiful bill passed by Congress earlier this year strips $187 billion from SNAP's budget over the next decade. And it also imposes new work requirements. It's worth noting that 55% of families with children who currently receive SNAP are already working. Our experts this week are Jamie Bussell, Senior Program Officer, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation; Joseph Labrera, Senior Director of Research for Food Assistance Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities; Eric Valadares, Executive Director of Family Connections; and Gina Plata-Nino, an Interim Director for SNAP at the Food Research and Action Center. Reporters, please enter your questions in the chat. We will get to as many as we can immediately after each speaker presents. We ask speakers to speak at a moderate pace for simultaneous interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean. So we begin with Jamie of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who will provide an overview of what's at stake for millions of families starting tomorrow. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Sunita, for having me. Again, my name is Jamie Bussell. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is a national health philanthropy based in Princeton, New Jersey, focused on a future where health is no longer the privilege for a few, but the right of all. We have a goal to create a more equitable society for all, centered in health and well-being. And we know we cannot realize health and well-being for all if we have people going hungry in America. And although hunger is not a new challenge for us in this country, what is new is that beginning tomorrow, the federal government will cut off funding for one of the most critical food and nutrition programs we have in this nation, called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, often referred to as SNAP. Additionally, I think it's noteworthy to mention that there is also much uncertainty about yet another critically important public health and nutrition program called Women, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as the WIC program. As Sunita referenced, and literally as we speak right now, a federal judge is expected to decide whether the Trump administration is legally on the hook to fund the SNAP program during this governmental shutdown in order to spare 42 million lower income Americans from losing benefits beginning tomorrow. To provide a little bit of background and to give you a sense of the breadth and depth of these programs, particularly SNAP, The SNAP program is a federal program that provides food assistance to 42 million low-income individuals and families in our country. The program is funded by the federal government and administered by the states. The benefits are used to purchase food at grocery stores, at corner stores, at farmers markets. SNAP is our nation's largest anti-hunger program dating back to the Great Depression, and it has never been disrupted this way. The WIC program is, again, another critically important federal food and nutrition program that provides food, formula, nutrition education, breastfeeding support, and a host of other healthcare services to pregnant, postpartum women, infants, and our youngest children. This crisis that we're talking about today is not happening because Congress doesn't have the money, but because our policymakers are choosing to prioritize politics over people instead of feeding people. And it's our families, our children, our seniors, our grandparents, our veterans that are caught in this political gridlock. When funding for SNAP and funding for WIC stop, we're all going to feel it. Families will go hungry. The 42 million people who participate in SNAP will not have the resources to ensure that they have adequate food during the month. And again, that includes children, families, people with disabilities, our seniors, our veterans. And over 7 million babies and families who participate in the WIC program will not be able to access food, formula, breastfeeding support, etc. These are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends, our family. This is all of us. And local economies are going to suffer as well. When you think about it, SNAP purchases, I've seen numbers as high as 15% of total grocery sales are with SNAP purchases. Grocery stores in areas across the nation, and particularly in rural areas, are going to be hit hard. Food banks are likely to be completely overwhelmed. And while our emergency food support systems are incredibly important lifelines in America, they do not replace the SNAP program. To give you a sense, for every meal a food bank is able to provide, the SNAP program provides 9. Think about that. So food banks cannot replace what SNAP does, and the ripple effects are enormous. When children are not going to be eligible to receive SNAP, they're likely to lose their eligibility in other food programs like the school lunch and breakfast program, like summer feeding programs. It's truly hard to fathom that we have come to this place. This is not who we are as a nation. These are public health and nutrition programs that work, and that work in powerful ways. SNAP is a critical and usually temporary support for millions of families in this country. And SNAP has a huge impact on people's well-being and ability to thrive. SNAP helps children grow up healthy and do well in school. SNAP supports improves food security. It shores up financial stability for kids and families, and it frees up money for other essential basic needs, and it reduces healthcare costs. SNAP is one of the most effective anti-poverty and pro-growth programs we have in America. For every dollar spent in SNAP benefits, that generates $1.80 in local economic activity. WIC is arguably our most important, most successful public health program in this country. It leads to healthier births, better infant development, improved dietary intake for mom and baby, and improved health outcomes. It reduces food insecurity and improves access to preventive health care and nutrition education for low-income pregnant, postpartum, and breastfeeding people. The power and impact of these programs cannot be overestimated. I'm not sure how anyone can justify not ensuring that these programs remain fully funded and fully operating. It doesn't make any sense at all. As a mom of 2 girls There's a quote from Nelson Mandela that has always resonated with me. And this isn't going to be new to most of you on this call, but I think it bears repeating right now. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Earlier this week, I was reading an op-ed in the Times and was moved by a similar passage, a similar principle. And it said, America is a great nation precisely because we have loved our neighbors as ourselves. Interestingly, these are the words of Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Now, I may not agree with the senator's politics, and maybe they're just the words of someone who's in a really tough re-election campaign, but I like to believe he truly believes those words, and that there are people with really good hearts in our US Congress on both sides of the aisle who want to do what's right and who want to feed people in this country. So I want to close by referencing a recent survey that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation supported, where we found that there is extraordinary shared consensus amongst people, conservatives and liberals, that the government has an important role to play in solving problems. And this same research shows that we all want the same basic things for ourselves, for our families, for the people we love: to feel safe in our communities, to have financial security, to be able to afford the places that we live in, and to feed our families. Until Congress decides it's ready to put the people that they work for first, we can and need to help each other. So what I'm about to share are not long-term systemic solutions, but it's what we can all do right now. I'd encourage everyone to support your local food bank. You can visit findhelp.org to locate one near you. You could partner with local farms, ask if you can sponsor a farm share, and you can check out localharvest.org to get started. I'd also encourage you to follow up with your parent and teacher organizations. See if there's something going on to help ensure that kids can take food home for the weekends, or start something like that if there isn't. And finally, think about being a grocery buddy. Offer to cover groceries for a neighbor, a friend who could use a little bit of extra support this month. We have really crossed the point of absurdity. We're better than this. Children, families, and communities across the nation are counting on our policymakers. They need to deliver on their promises and truly be accountable to the individuals and families that they serve. No one in this country should ever go hungry. Every family should be able to comfortably afford and access the food that they need to thrive. Access to healthy, affordable food should be a fundamental, basic human right. Thank you.
Jamie, thank you so much. Let's start with Nestor Fantini, who asked about the lawsuit. Nestor of Hispanic LA, could you please ask your question for Jamie?
Yes, thank you, Sunita. The 25 state lawsuit argues that the suspension of SNAP violates the Food and Nutrition Act and is arbitrary, and capricious. And the question is, could you briefly explain how those two legal arguments form the basis of the case?
I can try and do my best and then ask my fellow panelists to weigh in. So as you said, 25 states and the District of Columbia have sued the Trump administration over withholding food aid funding. Democratic attorneys general and governors from these 25 states sued the administration on Tuesday of this week, essentially saying that the USDA violated federal law by planning to suspend benefits for SNAP. The lawsuit is asking the judge in Massachusetts to overturn the administration's earlier directives instructing states to withhold benefits and require USDA to use all available funds to keep SNAP flowing through November. So that's what I'm able to share. I don't know if others have more details than that, probably.
So the decision just dropped. The judge has not necessarily, it doesn't grant the temporary restraining order. That's what they were asking. They were forcing USDA to utilize its authority. And the main authority was saying it's because there were two memos released last Friday where USDA said we cannot touch. Number one, it violated the Hatch Act because it was incredibly political. In addition to, it wasn't signed. Most memos are signed and didn't have a point of contact. And the memo said that those contingency funds can only be utilized in case of an emergency. That is incorrect. Precedents and other shutdowns have shown that that is incorrect, since the administration have been utilizing the funds already to cover administrative funding to the states. What just dropped at the moment, and big caveat that in the process of reading the very long order and getting many messages about this, but it basically says that it doesn't grant the temporary restraining order for payment for next month. The judge says that USA has that power, but wants an answer by this Monday as to whether or not it will do so. So on Monday, we will find out, but I just wanted to say how Jamie started up the front. We don't need a lawsuit. The president can easily tell USDA to utilize its contingency and reserve funding in order to do this. And I'll stop there because I know I'm speaking later.
Yeah, so then let's follow up to Gina's comments there. What happens? Will people get their SNAP funding? They will not. Yes.
So it's a complicated process. SNAP operates, think about the state takes these case files where it notates the amount of people who are eligible and how much they're going to get. They send those case files over to an EBT contractor. That EBT contractor, and there's two main ones across the country, takes those case files, sends them to USDA and says, this is how much money we need to ensure that come the beginning of the month, a SNAP recipient goes to a participating EBT retailer and they scan that card, that there is money in that card. USDA says, yes, here's the state letter of credit, EBT processor, take it, and the process begins. For the most part, some states begin doing this process the beginning, like the first week of the month, which is why we have been asking the administration to move forward on this by last week, because even if the president changed his mind today and said, we're going to move forward, it's still going to take a couple of days in order to people's benefits to be there on time.
Thank you so much, Gina. Let me get one more question for Jamie before we move on to Joseph. Araceli Martinez of La Opinion, could you please ask your question?
Thank you, Sunita. Thank you for the opportunity. I was wondering that given that we had that food prices are skyrocketing, everything is too expensive. What is the outlook for these families that depend of these coupons? And in the case of California, is the government doing or planning to do something in order to alleviate the problem? Because this is going to be, in a few weeks, it's going to be very difficult for the families. Thank you.
Jamie?
So, Sunita, I might defer to my California colleague on the California specific question, but I'll just say I don't have an answer, but I think the point that she was making is really important, that we sort of have this like tsunami, if you will, of, high cost of food, governmental shutdown, and in addition, separate from all this, the significant changes that are happening regardless within the SNAP program that I suspect Gina's probably going to talk some about. So it's sort of like this perfect storm impacting people in, the most insidious ways. And so unfortunately right now, like we don't have these like huge solutions. I think we're going to see innovation at the state and local level. But I think we need to be, obviously all thinking bigger about that. And like perhaps there are things that we could deploy as we look at what unfolded during COVID with, again, these are not permanent solutions, but, moratorium on evictions. This is going to make it really challenging for people across the country to, they're going to be faced with making really hard decisions about eating, their health care, or paying the rent. And so I think we just need to be thinking about and pushing our policymakers to think about like these bigger potential solutions. And again, I know that's probably a quite unsatisfying answer given where we're at.
Jamie, thank you so much. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to Joseph, but there are a number of questions for you in the chat. If you could answer them there, that would be terrific. Our next speaker is Joseph Lobrera from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Joseph will discuss the USDA's contingency reserves for SNAP, which are currently not being used, as well as the implications of the $187 billion cut to SNAP's budget over the next decade. Welcome, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Sunita and Sandy, for having me here. And thank you to Jamie for setting that important context for our discussion today. And I also wanted to thank Eric and Gina for joining me here. My name is Joseph Lobrera. I am at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a nonpartisan research and policy institute based in DC. What's happening right now is truly unprecedented and will result in an increase in hardship that we haven't seen on this scale in this nation. As Jamie explained, over 40 million people stand to lose the food assistance they need to feed their families in November, a time when families come together at the table over the holidays. That includes 16 million children, 8 million older adults, 4 million non-elderly adults with disabilities. In California, over $1 billion in SNAP benefits goes out every month, helping over 5 million Californians afford the food that they need. That's 1 in 7 in the state. And that's just the immediate shutdown crisis that we're looking at that will interrupt benefits in November. On top of that, new rules that are part of the harmful Republican reconciliation bill enacted this past July are also taking effect that will cut off eligibility for millions of people in the months and years to come. So I did want to take some time to break it down. I know there's a lot going on in SNAP, but I appreciate your attention to this issue. First, let's talk about the crisis that is about to unfold in the next few days due to the shutdown. USDA has said that no one will get November benefits because of the shutdown, but that is deeply, deeply concerning. The administration absolutely has the legal authority and responsibility to release SNAP benefits in November. Congress has already provided multi-year contingency funds for SNAP, money that's set aside precisely for situations like funding shortfalls or shutdowns. This is an emergency which has led over 24 states, as we've discussed, to sue the administration. As the federal judge overseeing the case said on Thursday, Congress has put funding in an emergency fund for an emergency, and it's hard for me to understand how this isn't an emergency. Next, the law is clear. SNAP contingency funds can be used for all necessary program activities, including benefits. Nothing in the law blocks the use of the contingency reserve. It would be unprecedented to allow a lapse in SNAP benefits. Every prior shutdown under both Republican and Democratic administrations has ensured families receive their full benefits. We have not seen this widespread interruption of benefits going back 60 years when the program was made permanent. This administration, during the previous Trump 2018-2019 shutdown during the previous Trump administration, and as recently as September 30th of this year, confirmed that it could use the contingency reserve for benefits. Without these actions, USDA would cut all SNAP benefits for all participating households. This would harm 40 million people nationwide, a completely preventable outcome if the administration acts swiftly. The bottom line is the administration's refusal to fully fund SNAP benefits in November is a choice. Families should not go hungry because of that choice. So that's the immediate crisis that we're facing, but there's something beyond that's already also starting to happen. The reconciliation bill that passed in July of this year had made wide-ranging and large-scale changes to our nation's tax and social policies. With regards to SNAP, it cut SNAP by $187 billion through 2034. That amounts to a 20% cut, the largest in the history of the program. We at CBPP estimate that nationally, about 4 million people, including 1 million children, will lose all or a substantial amount of food assistance when provisions take full effect in the next few years. There are 4 ways the reconciliation bill takes food assistance away from people who need help affording food. First, the new law slashes federal funding for states' SNAP programs, forcing unaffordable costs on them and risking deep cuts, or even some states ending SNAP entirely. It does this by radically altering the structure of SNAP by shifting a share of benefit costs to states for the first time in the history of the program. States would be faced with large and volatile costs and will struggle to absorb these new costs. Most states will face costs between 5 to 15% of total benefit costs. Just to give you a sense of how large those are, for California, a 5% match amounts to $600 million a year. At a 15% match, that would amount to $1.8 billion a year. The second way that the bill harms people who need help affording food, it takes food assistance away from millions of people by expanding harsh and ineffective work requirements, as was mentioned earlier. For decades, SNAP has had a work requirement. If you were a working age adult not living with a child, you could only receive SNAP for 3 months out of a 3-year period, unless you were able to document that you worked 80 hours a month or that you had an exemption, such as a disability. This additional paperwork each month that individuals and families had to fill out and caseworkers had to process was a major administrative hurdle that deterred participation in the program. The new law puts millions more at risk of losing benefits. Now, parents and caregivers with older children in the household and older adults aged 55 to 64 have to meet this work requirement. The law also eliminated exemptions for veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and those who have aged out of foster care. In California alone, we estimate that hundreds of thousands of people will be at risk of losing some amount of SNAP due to the expansion of work requirements. The third harmful effect that the law will have is that it denies food assistance to many people who are immigrants living lawfully in the United States who have been granted humanitarian protections by the US government. Those affected would include refugees, people granted asylum, certain survivors of domestic violence, and certain victims of sex or labor trafficking. It's important to remember that people who lack documentation were and continue to be ineligible for SNAP. Fourth, and finally, the bill cuts food benefits by preventing SNAP from keeping pace with the cost of a healthy diet and increases paperwork for households to prove their other expenses. And so with that, I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, Joseph, the first question for me, why can't states backfill the federal cuts to SNAP? The average payment is $187 a month, which seems somewhat insignificant. If you could just weigh in on that, that would be terrific. I think it's important for people to understand.
Yeah, the average benefit may sound like relatively small amount, but it's meaningful for the households that receive that benefit. And again, we're talking about 1 in 8 people in the US that are participating in this program. So it is a huge investment that we as a nation have made. The federal government has paid for those benefits in the past, and that's a cost that states have not budgeted for in this crisis. There's, as I shared in an AP news, states are scrambling to figure out what they can do in the moment, but it just speaks to the reach and importance of the program, that the magnitude of that investment in making sure that people don't go hungry.
Thank you. There's a question from Aitana Vargas of KCAL, and she's asked me to ask the question: should emergency funds be used? By what percentage will SNAP payments be reduced?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe some of my colleagues can jump in as well. SNAP expenditures, or the value of SNAP benefits per month in recent months, has been on the order of $8 billion. Our understanding of what's in the contingency reserves at the moment is something less than $6 billion, somewhere between $5 to $6 billion. So that contingency reserve will cover most, but not all, of what we expect to be benefits for November. USDA has other pots of money that it has the authority to access. In fact, just a few weeks ago, they moved money around to make sure that WIC was funded for October. And so there are ways that the administration, between using the contingency reserve, which covers a good chunk but not all of what would be November benefits, but it also has access to other funding, other pots of money that it could reallocate. It's within its authority to reallocate to make sure that benefits in November flow to the families that need it. But I don't know, Jamie, Gina, or Eric, anything else to add?
Yeah. Let's move on to Gina. Joseph, thank you so much. There are a number of questions for you in the chat, and if you could answer them there, that would be terrific. We next welcome Gina Plata-Nino from the Food Research and Action Center, who will discuss the implications of SNAP cuts to children. It's worth noting here that 1 out of 5 children in the US rely on food stamps. Welcome, Gina.
Sorry, was literally getting updates. The 2 decisions, I'll start off saying that there was also another lawsuit that was filed by national nonprofits, and that one just came out as well. And it's a lot stronger than the one in Massachusetts. So things are coming out late. I think what is important to know is that we're here by a policy choice. Like my colleagues have already said, USDA could have stopped this before even beginning this chaos. When we think about children, I think it's important to know the majority of people on SNAP are children. But these children don't live alone. A 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, it's not going to work and like making sure they take care of themselves. They have caretakers. And these caretakers are working, they're just not making enough money. And they're making less than $1,100 a month, right? So they're already feeling these pressures. They're 70 to 80% of their income is going to shelter, leaving very limited amount for other basic needs. So when it comes into the impact of SNAP, these families relied on multiple benefits just to ensure that they have enough money, enough resources for the well-being of their children. And I just want to note that applying for SNAP, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work for families. Some states make it incredibly burdensome and difficult for families to be able to access this program. And like my colleague Joseph said, with the reconciliation bill, many other states will make it even more difficult in order to lower down access. And the reason why there are people who need SNAP is because it's depending on the economy. If our economy was strong, because SNAP is connected to what happens around, right? When there's a strong economy, when there's strong employment, when people are getting paid livable wages, people are not on SNAP. Majority of people on SNAP is because I lost my job. And we've seen people are losing their jobs constantly. It's a really difficult, tough job market. My wages have been reduced. or I have to take care of a family member. These are the parents of these kiddos. We call them the working poor, maybe working 2 to 3 jobs, and it is not enough to be able to meet these basic needs. And this program is what makes the difference between poverty and being able to come out of poverty, particularly in high cost livable states, right? Where everything costs even more, it makes the difference. I also think it's important to know that remote and rural areas have a higher percentage of food insecurity, meaning hunger. They have a higher percentage of poverty, and they also have a higher percentage of SNAP utilization. So what my colleague Joseph said, these time limits are going to be detrimental because it also covers kids 14 and under. A child is still a person at 15 is still a child. At 16, they're a child. At 17, and I will argue at many other ages are a child. But for the purposes of our conversation, these are still kids who need their parents to be able to take care of them. And, the shutdown and the reconciliation loss will have a direct impact on children whose parents can no longer be there if they can't show that they're meeting these requirements. And sort of moving forward, regardless of what comes the outcome of these lawsuits, the damage has been done. We saw it during the 2018-2019 shutdown, where yes, benefits were issued earlier, but there were studies that show that families lost their faith in government. It caused unnecessary anxiety and stress. And also what people don't remember is that, again, the Trump administration didn't give much information past March, where people are going to get benefits in March. So this anxiety of whether parents have to say, do I pay rent or do I pay for food? Do I pay for childcare or do I pay for food? Do I utilize my credit card? If I still have any credit cards left, because people have been utilizing their credit cards just to pay basic needs. So this just adds to a terrible time, particularly where food costs 3 times more than it did this time last year. And families and children, right? Because children don't live alone. Their ecosystem will impact them as parents, as children are asking, Mommy, why are you crying? Daddy, how come you're not eating enough? How come we don't have apples those weeks? Those are, really harsh questions that parents have to answer, to say, like, what are they supposed to say? I'm working 2 to 3 jobs, honey. And, I even applied for SNAP and went through a difficult interview process where I just felt really judged. And the government is playing, thinks that I am a political chess piece and it's not prioritizing me like it's doing its other priorities. So this is where we are, where the children thankfully are still getting their school meals, but when they come home or on the weekends, or as we get into the holiday season, school meals are not there for children.
Thank you, Gina. There are a number of questions for you in the chat. Let's start with Elena Kuzitsnova of Slavic SAC. Elena, could you please ask your question for Gina?
Yes, thank you, Sunita. So my question is that, so there is just literally 1 week left before the SNAP is cut. Where should the family that depend on the SNAP should go or apply for in order to get food help? And literally, what should they do in order to survive in that environment? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think Jamie did a very good job with her list. I don't know, Jamie, if you can put it in the chat or if you want to repeat it, but I just want to clarify that families will begin losing their SNAP benefits tomorrow. Not all at once, not all 42 million Americans, because the benefits are scattered. It's more accurate to say that if there's no movement or resolution by the middle of the month, almost 42 million Americans would have lost their benefits. That is the most accurate thing. But a large percentage will not have those benefits tomorrow. And where they can go, I'm gonna defer to my colleague Jamie, because she did a very good job detailing what families can do. But just wanted to say what she said, that yes, you can go to food banks. Yes, you can do those things, but it's still not enough for families. So Jamie, I don't know if you want to answer that.
Yeah,
again.
Gina, I'm happy to. I'm going to put in the chat like those few things that I had suggested, and then in addition, contacting your state social services department potentially for any updates on state level food assistance. And I think also just importantly, I don't know, Gina and others are going to know this way better than me. I don't get a good sense that the communication and information being disseminated to beneficiaries has been there or even that helpful. So, you know, another big concern is just people not even knowing that they should be anticipating this significant change for the month of November. So, you know, encouraging folks to make sure that their contact information, like addresses, are up to date and their
Jamie, did you freeze?
Yes, she did. And that's fine. Gina, thank you for your comments. Oh, actually, let's take one from Peter Sherman. Peter, ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I think Gina answered my earlier question, but if it's okay, I'd like to pose another one. I'm not sure who can answer this, but there's a lot of attention now on Russell Vought, who's the head of the Congressional Budget Office, and the drafter of Project 2025. I'm curious what the speakers think. Is there an attempt to kind of permanently sort of dismantle SNAP and similar programs as part of this bigger effort to just shrink the government? Thank you.
I think, Joseph, you and I can tag team on this question if you like. We at FRAC believe so. I mean, as Joseph said, the $187 billion gutting of the program, it shows indication. If you look at Project 2025, they're pretty much following that guideline in terms of how to create chaos, panic, and seeing how they are looking at other ways, proposed rulemaking, administrative avenues to even further the program even further. So it's our opinion that unfortunately, their agenda of Project 2025, and he is the Office of Management and Budget. We haven't spoken about it quite a lot, but that office also shifted the way that the government shutdown it's going forward. Instead of employees being furloughed, also said that they could be permanently terminated, rift, right? So this shows that OMB is really the one responsible, can act and can tell the secretary to issue those fundings and contingency. Joseph, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add.
Yeah, no, it's clearly part of the Republican agenda. We see it in the president's budget. We saw it in Project 2025, the expansion of those work requirements. We see it in the bills that were brought up preceding the reconciliation bill, during farm bill discussions, during the debt ceiling debate a couple of years ago. The only thing I would add to what Gina said is either by choice or by hollowing out of the federal agency, USDA, the administration is making it very hard for states to be in compliance or be responsive to all the new law and requirements of the new law, issuing guidance with just few days before they are binding, just making it very hard for states to do the right thing. So on so many different levels, funding, the cuts to SNAP, rules that make it very hard for households to get access SNAP, and then really undermining the agencies, is undermining states' ability to be in compliance to follow the new law, that very complex new law that's in place.
Thank you, Gina and Joseph. And in the interest of time, there are a number of questions, but Gina, if you could answer those in the chat, that would be terrific. Our final speaker today is Eric Valladares of Family Connections. Eric will provide an on-the-ground perspective of the impact of SNAP cuts to the low-income immigrant families that his organization supports. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Sunita, for having me, and thank you, Jamie, Joseph, and Gina. It's been, really informative listening to you all, and grateful for all the work that you're all doing to support our communities, our families, and a reminder to me how important, these roles, the roles you all have are, and the organizations, the roles that they play. So thank you all so much for the hard work you're all doing. I'm the executive director at Family Connections. We provide free, high quality early learning family education, and mental health services to low-income families with children from birth to age 5 in San Mateo County. We have 3 sites in Daly City, Redwood City, and East Palo Alto, and our programs help children build strong foundations for learning while strengthening caregiver skills and promoting family well-being. Recently, in response to growing needs, we've expanded beyond our 3 sites to provide early childhood mental health services to families enrolled in early Head Start and Head Start programs across the county. And we also offer free playgroups, parenting workshops, and support groups that are open to all families in the community. So when thinking about what's happening now, for us and for me, it's really important to think about how families have already been impacted by many of the policy changes set forth by the current administration, and especially those policies are intended to impact those who are immigrants or living on low incomes or both. In this previous fiscal year from 24 to 25, we served 917 caregivers and children. 57% of them identify as Latino or Latina, and nearly half speak Spanish as their primary language. Just to add a little bit more context in terms of just San Mateo County, nearly 17% of the children that live in San Mateo County live in families with incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level. So as you can imagine, we've seen a rise in fear, anxiety, and toxic stress among the caregivers we serve. And it's just really driven by the uncertainty around benefits, housing, immigration policies. The stress, as you can imagine, directly affects the parent-child relationships. With caregivers are overwhelmed, they just don't have the same capacity to respond to the many different needs that their children have. We've seen enrollment in programs like ours decline across the county. It's not just for Family Connections. Our partner organizations report that same trend, and truly we're worried that families are withdrawing from community systems of support, often because they just fear sharing personal information or worry that receiving services could jeopardize their immigration status. For families we serve, although we do focus on early learning, we focus on mental health. What we've learned is basic stability comes before everything else. Without secure housing, food, or income, families simply cannot focus on their children's development or well-being. While Family Connections, we started as a co-op learning program. We learned that educational services, as we mentioned, alone are not enough. Families need case management, they need mental health support and resource navigation to survive and thrive. Over 75% of the families we serve have incomes at or below 50% of the area median income, placing them in the extremely low or very low income categories. In San Mateo County, where median household income exceeds $150,000, the gap between what families earn and what they need to make basic expenses is incredibly vast. Childcare alone can cost anywhere from $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a year. And a 2022 county survey found that more than 80% of parents said affordable childcare was somewhat or very hard to find. And so what we're talking about losing, public benefits, we're talking about basic needs insecurity. We're seeing caregivers under financial strain are experiencing an increase in chronic stress and anxiety, which research shows their ability to respond calmly, which impacts their ability to respond calmly and consistently to their children. Housing instability, without benefits to help cover rent or utilities, families may move frequently or double up. And in this case, it's thinking about the impact of just food insecurity, how that's going, as Gina was saying, families are having to make really difficult decisions about prioritizing where limited funds need to go. And as I mentioned earlier, we're really concerned about the decline in participation. There's families that have reported they're concerned about public charge, and just since there's always been kind of a lot of fear and uncertainty on how accessing programs can impact their ability to apply for a green card, apply for a visa. And so what we're navigating right now and what we're seeing from our families, it's really undermining family stability. It's undermining children's healthy development and the long-term well-being of our community. So what we're seeing and what we're doing now is we're really bolstering our case management and home visiting services. So we're providing one-on-one support to families so that they can get directly connected to resources, so that way they can navigate this really challenging time. We have found that because of many of the concerns our families have around different organizations and fear about, how information is being shared or used, really the one-on-one connection is really important, because these are people that they feel that they can trust, feel safe asking for help. We have already also regularly visited local food pantries to gather groceries for our classes, for families in our classes. They can have snack time meals taken care of. And we also provide additional food for families that have reported that they are needing more support and needing to have more access to food. We're providing free diapers and supplies and ways of trying to just ease the financial burden in one area, so that hopefully they can use funds for things like buying groceries, or if they need to pay rent. And we've also, our expansion of early childhood mental health programming has allowed us to reach more families, connecting them to counseling, classroom support, and ultimately also case management. The last thing, just to conclude, is I will say, it's been very difficult. It's not just for our families, but it's also for our staff. We've a lot of nonprofits, not just ours, has really championed for, I would say, a long time, hiring and recruiting staff who are part of our communities. And what that means is that the impact of things that are happening don't no longer just impact our families or the ones we serve. They impact our staff, they impact the people they care about, and they're still finding ways to show up for our families and for the community. So it's been incredibly difficult, but I will say, in the darkness, we always find some light. And as I mentioned earlier, my gratitude to all of you for spotlighting this really critical issues to so many of for many of the families in our community, and all of the incredible work that's happening. And we have seen response from some of our donors who are stepping up to increase their financial support to cover critical gaps. Foundations are also offering emergency grants, which have been really helpful in terms of just providing minimal information to just get the money out as quickly as possible to families that need it. And we've also seen how San Mateo County is providing emergency funding as well, resources, and multilingual outreach to ensure families know how to access help. So I want to share about Family Connections. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Eric. I wanted to ask you about something that we had discussed while we chatted before this call. You had said that many of your families are fearing going to food banks because of concerns about ICE at those centers. Could you talk about that a little bit? Are families actually not going to food banks?
Yes, thank you, Sunita, for reminding me. I think that's part of, highlighting that piece around the context in which this is happening, in that families are already fearful of reaching out to support, especially, I would say, large gatherings, or if they're saying like, hey, come to this food bank, areas where there's more visibility. It is a concern for our families that it even happened. We noticed when the Know Your Rights workshops were happening, they weren't very highly attended, not because the information wasn't valuable, but because they saw it as almost like a double-edged sword, in the sense that there were valuable resources being provided, but there was potentially a risk for them in going to access those resources. And we're seeing those things play out now, which is why I believe our case managers are critical in helping families kind of find a safer route, in at least for them to be able to get be able to get groceries, food provided to them without risking going out into the community. But as you can imagine, not all families are having access to case management services. So we do think often about which families are going out and potentially feeling like they're not wanting to expose themselves or their families to potentially any kind of immigration enforcement.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat here. Many people, because of the Republican narrative, believe that undocumented folks can apply for SNAP benefits. Could you please correct that narrative?
I'm so sorry. The question, Sydney, about the
undocumented people are getting SNAP, are getting food assistance, and that's obviously not correct. Could you correct that narrative?
Yes, that's absolutely not correct, and and I'm sure we could spend a lot of time, but this is also where our families, where social media has become a tool, as especially for families that are maybe more isolated and siloed, to seek social media as a way to gather information. But unfortunately, because of the incredible amount of misinformation that is out there, a lot of families continue to need that reassurance that their immigration status will not be impacted by them reaching out and accessing these resources. But we find that whenever something like this happens, it bubbles all the way right up to the top. And the fear around how this is going to impact me long term, often they just say, I'd rather not access services because I'd rather not jeopardize anything related to my immigration status.
Yeah, and Sandra Martinez from Peninsula 360 Press has a question for you. Sandra, please ask your question. Jessica, could you please unmute Sandra? I will ask the question on her behalf. What would be the key message you would convey in terms of hope in food support and the options available to immigrant families? That's a question from Sandra Martinez of Peninsula 360 Press, right in your backyard, Eric.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I would say spaces like this give us hope, and I would say to our families is that we are. I will. This is really difficult, but I would also say I can't help but be grateful even in these moments of that are difficult, that our community and our county is responding. We want to help. I would say to families, even if you don't trust a large organization, a small organization, reach out to someone you do trust. Reach out to an individual you trust who can potentially be the bridge to larger network of support. I would say there are many resources available, and I've seen not just nonprofits, all partners really lean in at this challenging time. I think there's a lot of hope to be found there. Hope is exhausting. I did hear that hope is an active emotion, and it can feel very heavy at times, especially for our families. But I would say that the community does care, and to reach out to that one connection, because that could be all it takes to make a difference and to make sure that they're connected to critical resources during this challenging time.
Thank you. There's so many more questions, but unfortunately we are running out of time. We move to a brief soundbite from each speaker, the most important points that they would like to leave reporters with. Let's start with Jamie. Jamie, are you still there? Let's move on then. Let's go to Joseph.
Oh,
oh, there you are, Jamie.
I couldn't get off mute for whatever reason. I'm so sorry. I'll be so quick. So sorry.
Yeah.
I would say healthy and adequate nutrition are key to good health and well-being, and everyone in this country should be able to put food on their table. As of today, I think Gina said this really well, our policymakers have made a choice and a decision and have failed to fund the SNAP program for the first time in history. Our president, Dr. Rich Besser, just issued a statement today that people's lives and livelihoods are not political pawns. A family's ability to afford food is not a bargaining chip. And so just to close, in the wealthiest nation on the planet, adequate food and good health should not be a privilege for a few, but really the right for all.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Joseph.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to join you all. On the shutdown, I'll say at a time when families should be coming together around the table this November, the Trump administration is choosing to take food off of the table. Families should not go hungry because of that choice. And I'm hoping with these rulings, on these cases, that USDA will move quickly to minimize the disruption that families will experience. And on the harmful Republican mega bill that was enacted this past summer, those made historic cuts to SNAP. To lessen the harm of that bill, we need to delay, or even better, undo the harmful SNAP provisions in that law so that millions of people can access the food assistance that they need to put food on the table.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Gina. your final remarks.
We may have lost Gina to the swirl of late breaking news. Oh, yeah.
All right. So final remarks from Eric.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard for our families. Our families deserve better. It's heartbreaking. It's infuriating. As a child of immigrants, it's personal and to me. But what I will say is, in spite of these challenges, I continue to be inspired by the families that continue to show up for their kiddos, for themselves. And I hope that they feel the community not just behind them, but standing next to them. And we will overcome this. And I've seen families overcoming just the some of the tallest, highest mountains ever. And they're not alone. I would say that they're not alone, and that and that we're here for whatever they may need.
Thank you so much, Eric. Speakers, thank you for your excellent insight into this tragic but completely preventable crisis. We hope you will join us again at a future briefing. Reporters, please note there's no briefing next Friday, November 7th, as ACOM hosts its annual expo and award ceremony